Right. My name is Derek, and I'm a drug addict.
Hey, Derek.
I'll start with a few facts about myself. I'm 34 years old. My clean date, what do you call it here?
Go for it.
The day that drugs and alcohol were removed from me by a power greater than myself was September 18th, 2013. I have a sponsor. I have a home group. I have a working knowledge of the 12 steps, and all of those things are just things that keep me closer to a power that does for me now what I never could have done before. Pretty stereotypical upbringing, had everything I needed, most of what I wanted. I was raised in the church. I know today that I suffer from a disease of perception, so I can tell you what I remember, but I can't guarantee you that that's what happened. My entire life, I can tell you what I remember, but the base of my disease is I don't see the world the way it's actually happening. But what I remember about church was just, it was boring. I was told I was going to hell, and then I'd leave just feeling bad. So that never really did anything for me. My earliest memories, I had this obsession, compulsion to either obtain something or become something, and then everything would be okay. And a good example of that was like middle school. I was really overweight. I was picked on a lot. When I used to run on the playground, kids would hit the ground and shake and yell earthquake. The funny, Jeremy? And like, all I wanted was just to be one of the cool kids and be like in the mix. I'm like this outcast. I'm doing weird stuff all the time just to get attention and then feeling bad about it afterwards because it was horrible attention that made me even more weird and outcast from the other kids. But I remember it was a Halloween dance. And no, it wasn't. It was not a Halloween dance. That's what makes this so funny. In my head, there was a dance coming up, and in my head, I was just going to show up in a gorilla costume and not tell anybody who I was. And the idea was I was going to go there and have a good time. And then at the end, I'd take the hood off, and everybody would be like, "Oh my God, it's Derek. He is cool." So I convinced my parents to get me this gorilla costume. And like nobody cared. I was just standing there by myself at this middle school dancing a gorilla costume. And nobody cared when I took the mask off. But anyway, it was always just stuff like that. It's always the next big thing. I'm the next big thing kind of guy even today. But then it was always like, I've got to lose this weight. I've got to join the football team. And then people will like me, no, that's not cool. Okay, I'm going to do the drama club. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And I'm always just chasing. So when I was 14 years old, my mom got on the whole your stereotypical Midwest pain management doctor thing. And when I was 14, she gave me a Vicodin. And I will never be able to describe what that did for me. It fixed everything. I had no idea how painful my life was until I had a solution for that. Because I was just ill-equipped for this world. The way I see things, the way I operate, everything was not ideal. And when I took something, I experienced freedom for the first time in my life. And the physical aspect didn't take off immediately, but like I knew what I was about and I knew what I was doing. I went from like this nerdy kid in the marching band to growing my hair out and wearing Bob Marley t-shirts and cutting class and getting in trouble and all this stuff. And I can remember junior year of high school, WebMD had first come out. And I'm looking up I'm having all these insomnia problems. Bugging my parents to take me to the doctor. I'm seeing doctors, all this stuff, and I look up my symptoms, and it says restless leg syndrome. Normally diagnosed in people age 70 or older. And I didn't know, but I was going through physical withdrawal symptoms already junior year in high school. Like I was a full-blown drug addict. And I grew up in this small town in Northeast Ohio. So I knew there was a problem, but I thought the problem was the town. You know, I graduated with 50 people There's nothing to do in that town. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to get out of here. And once I have something to keep me occupied, it's going to be okay. And I went to Christian college. When I went to Christian college, within 2 months, I was expelled for selling drugs there. It's funny. It's actually one of the guys on my amends list. He was my roommate. He told on me, so I had this huge resentment for him, right? And I peed in his milk every day for the rest. It was such a small college that they kept us together even after he told on me. And I peed in his milk for like weeks and weeks and weeks. And then I told him right before I was fully expelled. Later in sobriety, I went back and I made amends, and I also owed him $500. And I tried to pay him the money, and he didn't take it back. But he's a preacher now, and I went to his church, and we had a nice meal with the old ladies, and it's all good now. But that's the kind of person I was. But anyway, I come home from Christian college, and I get on this. The temp agency was the best for a drug addict who is constitutionally incapable of holding employment. Like, I could not do it. I would go into these factories. I can still remember I'm on an assembly line 12 hours a day. The big Tupperware boxes would come out, and there'd be the plastic strings hanging off of them, and I had a little torch to burn them off. And I nod out at the assembly line, and I wake up, and there's a pile taller than me, and I just leave. and I tell my friends and family, like, yeah, they just need me at the next factory. Because you never, like, when you're at a temp agency, they just keep giving you jobs. So I just have all these different things. That's when I started, like, I don't know, the incomprehensible demoralization is progressive, and it starts off small. And I think, like, the best example for me with that was there was the family change jar. Starts off, I'm going to take some of the quarters, but I'm not going to take all the quarters. All right, I took all the quarters. I'm going to take some of the dimes. I'm not going to take all the dimes. I take all the dimes. The nickels, and then the next thing, you know, I'm going to the bank with pennies. My parents want to know where all the change went. Starts off with stuff like that, but eventually, you know, like, anybody that will trust me, I will tell them I can get whatever it is they want to get. I just got to run into my guy's house. And, you know, some people I'd disappear on. With closer ones, you know, I'd have someone else punch me in the face like 3 times, and then I'd come out with a black eye and, like, oh, they beat me up and took the money. But I was high, you know. And it's just this life of chaos, right? Like, I start ending up in jail. Well, actually, rehab was first. When I was 19, I went to my first rehab, and I thought the pain of addiction was withdrawal. When they were talking about the pain, I just thought they were talking about, you know, what would happen when I got sick. I hadn't experienced anything yet. I still had parents that were coddling me. I still had, like, means to make things happen. I still had some people supporting me. And I got kicked out 2 weeks into that, because once they got me off the Suboxone, I started buying Suboxone off the detox patients. Because I can't. Like, when people would tell me that they, you know, they're in recovery, or, you know, they used to have a drug problem or something like that, in my head, I'd be like, you ain't got it like I got it. Like, I have to have something. I will explode out of my skin and literally jump off a building if I don't have something. So I start on this, like, track of rehabs, and I'm in and out of jail. I went to this Bible camp rehab where they gave you Xanax and methadone, and that was, like, one of the best treatment centers I've ever been to. It was a blast. Eventually, I got arrested there for possession of LSD. It's funny. That seems insane, but I knew deep down I needed something of like a spiritual nature to figure out what was going on and what was wrong with me. And I don't know, I could talk about the consequences, all these different consequences. And when you tell them, it makes it sound like it was like this horrible life. But to tell you the truth, I was only in pain probably like the last year and a half of it when the drugs stopped working. When they're working, send me to jail. Send me to rehab. I'll listen to my family cry a little bit. I'll lose all my friends. Like, when the drugs are working, that is a very small price to pay. I was just in La La Land the entire time, but by the time all is like said and done, I've been to treatment 7 times. I got 5 years of prison over my head. I have this long trail of just like sad failed relationships, friends that have died horribly, huge opportunities wasted. Nobody will talk to me anymore. And I clarify this, that when I was, first in recovery, I used to say, like, I was homeless, but I was homeless for like 2 weeks. It was very hard for me out there. I don't operate very well on the street. I have soft hands. It was tough. But I violated probation. So this entire time, not this entire time, but the last bit of it, I joined this touring reggae band, which is like exactly what my life needed. And I was on felony papers. And I thought that if I could just hide my identity on Facebook and call myself Derek Funkenstein, that probation wouldn't find that I was leaving the state. And one day I go in there and she's like, Derek, have you been leaving the state? And I'm like, no. And then there's a picture of me shirtless in front of Niagara Falls with my fingers sticking out of my zipper holding up a hula hoop. She's like, oh, really, Derek Funkenstein? And that was like the big one. All this time, I had a probation officer that was this like really nice lady. It was her first year, and I manipulated her into letting me off so many times. I had the best story. If you met me within 5 minutes, I had this story of like, my mom introduced me to opioids when I was 14 years old. My girlfriend, who I love very much, just died tragically. Like, I had all this stuff that I used to fortify my position, right? Today I know men and women drink, use drugs essentially because they like the effect produced by it. I would have been in that position whether those things happened or not. But yeah, so I'm like playing guitar in front of the casino in Cleveland for just enough money to not have diarrhea. That's like it wasn't a party anymore. It was just trying to keep my pants clean. I'm alone. There's a story Jeremy likes where I'm playing. This is during one of my stimulant phases, so I'd have these periods where I really felt like I was on top of it, like I was living the free life, right? Like, look at you guys going to your jobs, and I'm just out here free. And I'm playing guitar, and this girl comes walking up, and in my head, I'm like, I'm gonna get her number. And she sets a Gatorade and a Cliff Bar in my case, and just like one tear goes running down her face. She walked away, and I'm like, I'm not doing so good. I finally get in front of the judge, and he's like, Derek, you were supposed to be cut off probation 5 years ago. What do you want me to do with you? Do you want to go to prison? And I'm like, if you think that'll help, I'll go. I had nothing left. There was like no soles to my shoes. I was big on quests. I had a lot of quests. My entire existence was confined to about 4 blocks on the east side of Cleveland. It was crazy. And, I weigh like 165 pounds. I'm 6'3". I'm like just the Walking Dead. And the judge had some pity on me and sent me to rehab again. And while I'm waiting to get in, my dad comes back into my life, and the CEO of the company he worked for was an active member of AA. And while I'm waiting to get into treatment, my dad's just taking me to work with him. He has to babysit me. I'm a 23-year-old man, but I have to be babysat because if you leave me alone, like, who knows what's going to happen, right? And at this time, I'm Derek Funkenstein. I have an alter ego. It was a meth thing. I don't know. I guess I never got alter egos during my opioid phases, but during the meth phases, I got alter egos, and it was Derek Funkenstein. I'm wearing like a plaid blazer with no shirt underneath, gym shorts, sunglasses with one lens missing. I got this going on, and I'm just sitting in this conference room in this nice office building. Remember, the CEO of the company knew I played guitar, and all he had at home was his 6-year-old's guitar. So to keep me busy, he brought in that guitar. So just, I'm in there with the tiny little guitar, rocking back and forth, looking real crazy. And this guy comes in, he's my age, and he's like, my name's John. I used to live in a abandoned church in downtown Pittsburgh. I'm like, all right, cool. He's like, I've been to treatment 7 times. I'm like, all right. And he tells me all these horrible things about himself, but then he tells me he has 2 years of sobriety. And I don't know. People had tried to approach me before, but I believed it. I believed him. And not, like, it was like just this bop, 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 bop of this entire posse of people that were active in recovery that had just come in to talk to me. And even though, like, I literally just sniffed speed off the back of the toilet in there, that was like step 2 for me right there. Like, I came to believe that there's something going on with these 12 steps, that these people were telling me the truth, that they had the same condition I had. And I was like, what did you do and how did you do it? And he said he went to treatment, he went to a sober house afterwards, he got a sponsor, he worked the steps, and he tries to carry the message, and that's what he was doing then. And I know not everybody's experience is like the same as mine, but like right then I was sold. Like, no matter what, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to go do that. I got into treatment. While I'm in there, I'm calling this guy to get into a sober house, and he keeps asking me stuff like, well, do you have money for food? Do you have money for rent? And I'm like, yeah. And I didn't have any of. I'm just lying to get into treatment. I remember in the rehab, I like went into the cupboards and took all the bread and deli meat and took it to the halfway house. That's what all those guys remember me by. And I don't know. I got in, and there's like this crew of guys, and it feels like the biggest mistake of my life. It was like a bad episode of Jersey Shore. They were all hitting the gym like twice a day and listening to loud hip-hop music, and I still got this ego on me, right? Like, I'm like Derek Funkenstein, the pseudo-intellectual hippie hobo. Like, I'm above all these things. And I'll tell this every time I tell this story, because as time goes on, I become very business casual about the 12 steps. You know, did you write your 4th step yet? How many times are you praying a day? Blah, blah, blah. But I'm sitting there about to bust out of my skin. I'm still going through post-acute withdrawal syndrome. You know, I'm just feeling terrible, only 2 weeks clean. And they're watching football, and I hate watching sports. It's not for me. And this guy, Tommy, was like, you hate this, don't you? I'm like, yeah, dude, I'm dying. He goes, if you need a break, I have a TV in my room. You can go up there and, you know, watch something you want to watch. And for all we know, I'm here today because of that stupid little, like, somebody saw I was uncomfortable, and even though I was in the wrong, like, I was blessed, dude, getting into a sober house, having all this opportunity. Somebody went further than what made sense to take care of me, and it made all the difference. Somebody just looking out for me. And even with that knowledge and him doing those kinds of things, you know, he died as a direct result of this disease. I got a sponsor. I found out what was wrong with me. I knew something about the allergy. I knew that at a certain point, I can't stop, and it goes off the rails. And I remember I always had all these weird, like, I'm like, okay, I'm going to schedule out my week. Heroin, Suboxone, meth. And I won't get sick. You know, okay. We'll cut out the heroin. 25 gabapentin. like always something, like I knew that like once I pick up, I can't stop. I didn't know that I have this thing that's wrong with me, that it's not if I relapse, it's when. I detoxed and cleaned out so many times between treatment centers, jail stints, psych wards, literally like just biting the bullet and doing it at home with NyQuil and Imodium. But that day always came. Like there was nothing between me and that first one. It was, something would happen and it would make sense. Like I'll just do a little bit of this. And then next thing you know, like everything's tanked again. So I can't use safely. Once I use, I can't stop, and I can't not use. I'm totally screwed. I better be willing to believe in some kind of a God, right? Like, and I don't know. The proof of it was around me. For me, like what God started off as was the attitude in the rooms. God was this guy I just met that buys me chewing tobacco every 2 days and never asks me for anything. Like there's something going on here beyond my comprehension, and I need to get with it and get into it, right? I remember I got into the third step and I learned about like self-centeredness. Self-centeredness is the root of my problem. And I asked my sponsor, I'm like, what do you do about that? You're right. All I think about is myself. And he's like, you do good deeds in secret. So I remember waking up early before everybody else at the halfway house, and doing the dishes was Tommy's chore. So I go in and I sneak and I do the dishes and I clean up the whole kitchen, and then I go back to bed. And I, for the first time in my life, without any substances, like I caught a buzz. I remember listening to positive music. It's like a big thing for me today is like healthy diet, not only what I eat, but like everything I consume. When I'm listening to music, I'm not listening to stuff that's like purposely making me sad or angry. I don't listen to like hippie stuff. But anyway, listening to The Sign by Ace of Base, and I'm washing these dishes, and I felt something, and that was like the come to believe moment. That was like, okay, there's something here, and I'm following it. I start going through the steps with my sponsor, thorough 4th and 5th step. I get into amends. I have all these crazy, wild experiences from amends. Like I did like a countrywide tour for amends. I was taught, it's not people I harmed from drinking and using. It's everybody I harmed. So I had a list. Like I remember a middle school teacher I used to butt heads with all the time. I made her life hell. I used to eat the goldfish. The live goldfish in the end. She knew. It was crazy. I remember one of my friends goes, "Hey, Miss Sabo, where'd the goldfish go?" And she had been out of the room. She goes, "Derek ate it. Go to the office." She just knew. So I find her information. I go meet up with her, and I start on my bit. And she's like, "Derek, you don't have to explain anything to me. I've been a member of Al-Anon for 25 years. I'm like, okay, that explains our beef. I had just like the crazy. I traveled to Maryland to make amends to a woman for eating all her dog's tramadol, and she gave me $50. But I've also had ones. There's just these examples of like, I don't know what kind of havoc I created in the world. There was this guy from my church that I thought was like a nothing. I was just going to breeze through it, right? Like, he was one of those guys that, every once in a while you end up stranded somewhere, so you just call somebody that, like, is going to come pick you up, and you make up a story. And I used to do that every couple weeks with him. And I go to make amends to him, and he starts crying. And he's like, "Derek, we thought you were going to die. My wife and I were fighting all the time because I was trying to convince her to let you come stay with us so you could get better." Like, it's crazy to think about the negative externalities that were happening in this world because of how I was operating in this world. And I think it goes the opposite too. We don't we don't get to see all the good that happens from the good work we do here, but it's an endless ripple, right? And another amends, I went and made amends to my girlfriend that died, her mom. And I was taught it was 3 things, right? This is what I did wrong. If there was a way to write it, how would you have me write it? Is there anything I missed? And is there anything you'd like to say that you haven't yet? And when it got to, is there anything I missed? She let me have it with some hope. Like I'd become a person I could never imagine today that I was that person in a relationship. And at the end of it, she gave me Nicole's wallet that she had on her the day she died in a horrible car accident. There's a picture of me in her wallet and the to-do list for that day, which like the huge lesson for me out of all of that was like, yes, it's good to have a to-do list. Yes. We got to do things day to day, but you don't know what's going to happen. It's not about the to-do list, right? For me, everything just blew wide open. Amends were by far the biggest like changing force of all of this for me. But I get into 10 and 11. I learned how to meditate. That is one thing that has never changed. Like, I am not the best 12-step member. There are things I lack on, but every morning, bare minimum, 10 minutes, I'm just sitting there. I'm sitting there, I'm talking to God, whether it feels real or not. I'll tell you the truth. Some days I can feel the power of God in my life, and it's like a full feeling of belief. And other days I'm just acting as though until the feeling comes back. I heard a wise man once say, if you want to know what a man believes, look at his day-to-day actions. So I try to make sure my actions look like a man who believes in God. And then we get to step 12. I remember I'm in the halfway house, and the owner of the halfway house is this like used car salesman kind of a guy. And he goes, Derek, I hear you're on step 12. And I'm like, yeah, but he goes, but what, you're not ready? Nobody's ever ready. You remember the deal you made with the employer in the 3rd step? If you don't do the work, he fires you. You get drunk. Get in the van. And he just took me to another halfway house with a bunch of people I didn't know, and I'm just wandering around like with a big book. Like, oh, does anybody want to read Acceptance Was the Answer with me? But I don't know. Like I moved from Youngstown where I got clean up to Cleveland, and I'm doing all this stuff. I'm going to school full time. I'm touring in my band again. I got a remote job. I'm making some good money, all this stuff. And I'm just hitting like a meeting every week, which is fine for some people. You will meet people in these rooms that all they have to do is hit some meetings and kind of keep their conduct fairly clean, and they'll be okay. I'm an alcoholic and an addict of the hopeless variety. Like, just living generally okay is not good enough for me. So over the course of a few months, like, I just start dying on the inside. I'm achieving goals that mean nothing to me. Like, life is not worth living even though I'm getting everything I want. I'd say today recovery is like learning that lesson over and over in 1,000 different ways. The getting what I want doesn't even make me happy anyway, so forget about it. But I call one of the guys I got sober with, and he's a real like monk on the mountain kind of a guy who only answers your questions with questions. He's like, well, you got a God, right? I'm like, yeah, I got a God. He's like, well, do you think, God wants you to be comfortable all the time, or maybe you experience some pain to make you more effective at helping others? You have been helping others, right? I'm like, no. And I made a few small adjustments of like, I have to play the Good Samaritan every day if need be. Is what the book says. And I stop wearing headphones in public when I'm taking public transit to school. I'm like chatting it up with people, trying to be a light in this world. I start creeping around meetings like the guy from the Dare video, except opposite. Like, hey kid, you ever work the 12 steps? You're gonna know no freedom. Start sponsoring half the world. We start this meeting. The Bomb Diggity, Little Italy, Big Book Study for kids who can't recover good. We're just doing all this stuff, and all of the wild language in the book, like on the broad highway, hand in hand with the spirit of the universe, the great reality, sunlight of the spirit, all of those things become real again. And I don't know, throughout the course of all, like, that's the number one, like, I have to do that. I have to have a commitment where I'm going in somewhere and sharing. I'm not doing that right now, and I haven't for 2 months. I don't want to lie to you guys, but that's the one thing I have to make a part of my my deal is carrying this message. There's something about in religion they'd call it bearing witness, but what makes God real to me is telling other people about God. I gotta. It becomes just a concept or an idea, but I have to specifically talk to people about my experiences. Talk about like what I just did here today. Like review what my life looked like, what kind of a person I was, and what happened when I had a little bit of willingness, went through this program and tried to connect to God and what's happened now. Today, almost a decade of my sobriety, I was in a touring band. I got to travel the country and the world playing music. I have a college degree. I have a good career. I have a very healthy, awesome marriage. I have my first child on the way in April. On my 11-year anniversary, we went in for our appointment and I got to hear my baby's heartbeat for the first time. And it's like insane. It's insane the amount of blessings and dividends I've received from this program and just trying to do the next right thing. I think that's all I got.
Thank you.